So, Josh, you know Sebastian Maniscalco is one of my favorites. He has a bit in one of his stand-ups where he talks about his Jewish wife and the references that growing up Italian, he loves food, but his wife's Jewish family doesn't really feel the same. They're not as big into food. And then he goes on to ask a very important question.
Which is?
What happened to the Jews after breakfast? I think we need to ask my Jewish co-host exactly that and more on the Back Nine. So what happened to the Jews after breakfast? The bagels are amazing. You guys did an incredible job. I love this bit that he does, by the way, because you guys did an incredible job. And you do have some Jewish delis. I will give you that. But is there dinner ever in the picture here? What happens?
Of course. So first of all, let me dispel this. The idea, first, Jews love food, right? As the Jewish co-host, right, I have to be the representative for all Jews. And of course, there's a lot of variation. But we love eating. There's a lot of Jewish people who have started restaurants, right, and who run those kinds of things. But you're talking specifically about the cuisine of the Jewish culture. And let's celebrate what he celebrates, right? Breakfast is fantastic. Brunch,
we're great at brunch. Is nothing short of amazing.
You know, my younger brother was a chef for a while, and he did a pop-up where they had it's more Israeli than Jewish foods. A lot of dips and a couple of mini sandwiches. But all told, no, it's right. I mean, it's like brisket.
Oh, it is?
Yeah,
brisket.
We do brisket. Yeah, brisket's good. It's not like barbecued. It's not
like I'm not understanding
that. It's roasted. I don't know. I don't know. I can't. Listen, I'm the kind of guy that likes breakfast for dinner, and I can eat breakfast any hour of the day, all the time. I'm happy with
that. All right. Well, listen, as we drop this show, it is New Year's Eve. We're about to embark on 2025, which is crazy.
I'm having an omelet later tonight, in fact. So,
yeah, absolutely. After your
about
champagne,
9, 10 o'clock.
After your champagne to ring in the new year. So we have a really cool episode, and it's interesting. We're going to do dating in the new year. We're actually titling the show before it drops. Usually we listen to the show and then we title it. We are calling this dating in the new year. And it's interesting because I'm off the market.
Completely.
I'm off the market.
You are
so this
ringed
is
up.
Only for our listeners, and preferably on the Back Nine. But if you get some tips here on the Front Nine too, great. But we have now Brian Howie of the Great Love Debate podcast, and we are so grateful to have you on the show. And this is what you do, right? You are in this lane of helping people navigate the dating world, particularly Front Nine, Back Nine, whatever nine you're on.
Helping. I hope so. I mean, I always say my job is to raise the questions, not necessarily provide the answers, but through the act of raising the questions, we have a lot of answers. I've done that show as a live tour all over the world. I've been to Israel where the food is fantastic. I did a show in Tel Aviv. It was great.
So you have to answer that question later, by the way.
The Jewish food and Israeli food are different.
Yes.
You get a lot of Polish cuisine in your Jewish food sometimes.
Russian.
Yeah, Russian. Yeah. That's great. Borscht. But I've been a writer, director, producer for a long, long time, but most of the content that I always found myself creating was about the dynamic between men and women. Mm-hmm. So I got kind of curious about it on a level. I had a break in a project. I wrote a semi tongue-in-cheek book called How to Find Love in 60 Seconds, which was sort of a look at dating mostly in Hollywood. And then my agent at the time said, rather than do a traditional book tour with like 20 people in a Barnes & Noble, why don't you raise some of the questions the book raises in like a live theater setting, like town hall style? And I was supposed to do one of those as a promotional stunt. I have now done 465 live shows in 150 cities in 13 countries. It turned into the podcast. The podcast now is about to hit its 500th episode. And again, it is sort of an ongoing conversation where we sort of break down love, sex, dating, and relationships all over the world pretty much and try and get to the crux of the disconnect. So yes, Time Magazine called me a dating enthusiast, which is a little bit different from having any kind of expertise. And I kind of like that. Like I really like talking about this stuff.
So first of all, congratulations on 500 shows. Yeah. And we started our very first season with dating after divorce. And here we are kind of early in season 6 doing the same thing as we start the calendar year 2025. So were there some really good, I'm going to take that back. I'll come back to that question. What does it mean to be a dating enthusiast? Because I think there's a lot to learn, right?
It means that I'm both passionate and curious about the subject matter. I feel it is the only thing, besides maybe tacos, it is the only thing that all of us have hope for, experience with, pain from, perspective on. Like it's the only thing that I could sit down anybody on my podcast or just sit down on a park bench and talk about how do you feel about love, sex, dating, relationships. And everybody's got an opinion on it. Everybody's got perspective on it. Everybody hopefully has hope for. And congratulations, by the way. You know, I got into when I started doing the show, I was in my 40s and I had never been married. Still haven't been married, which is a giant red flag. And it should be. And, you know, so I have to deal with that question a lot. Yeah. And so I got featured on Nightline, ABC's Nightline a couple years ago. And the reporter asked me, after we did all the segments, she goes, "Is this whole thing really about you?" I go, maybe. Yeah. Maybe I'm asking questions of hundreds of thousands of people around the world because I'm trying to solve the puzzle for myself. And I think in solving the puzzle for myself, I think I'm helping other people along the way.
500 shows. You haven't solved it yet?
I think I know. I mean, I think, you know, I did a show last year. Like, it really does come down to fear, and the men are afraid of being rejected, and the women are afraid of being hurt. And that really affects every aspect of our behavior. We're afraid to go out of our comfort zone. We create certain patterns in our relationships that prevent us from finding what we want. My parents were married for, I don't know, 56 years. I don't even think they liked each other. So because I didn't trust their love for each other, I didn't trust it for me, I didn't quite trust the concept. So I needed to sort of take a deep dive to get out of this limited emotional bandwidth that I was kind of living in, to figure out, like, what am I not experiencing that maybe lots of people aren't?
That is such a good point. So many people from the boomer generation stayed together because that's what they were supposed to do. And so many people from our generation were informed by that. Like, divorce, no matter how painful, is the worst possible outcome for you. You are a sinner. You are a loser. You are a terrible person if you don't stick by your mate for life. That is ingrained in the Gen Xers to the nth degree, because the boomers live that life, and their parents in particular live that life.
And so I would say, I'm like, they don't seem particularly happy. This marriage thing doesn't seem great. There's not a lot of laughter in the Howie house. And so I'm like, maybe that's not for me. So I would get into these long-term relationships. I had girlfriends for a long, long time where I would put enough chips on the table to stay in the game, but I would never go all in, because in my mind, I'm like, I think the resume that I want to hand in is for boyfriend. That is much different from husband. It seemed it seemed more fun to me. But after a while, these girls, these women I was dating were like, "Do you not really understand like what we're supposed to be doing here?" I'm like, "We had fun last night. What are you talking about? We went to that part. We went to the movies. Went to the party." She goes, "You just don't get it." And I didn't get it because I was kind of emotionally walled off because of the environment I grew up in. Doing these shows after about 2 years sent me to therapy and had me deal with a lot of stuff, so that when I first started the Great Love Debate, I perceived myself more as a like Jerry Springer, like men against the women. You guys are all screwed up, blah, 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 like above the fray. Once I put myself into the muck, like I'm just like everybody else, and we're collectively trying to go on this, it changed everything. The show blew up. It got really popular. It really broke some walls down. And, you know, I don't know.
Are there universal truths that cross over genders, age ranges, preference, you know, heteronormativity versus an alternative lifestyle, or is everything different? You have to consider.
Well, there's things that are the same, and then there's things that are different. Like each city, you know, when I go into Seattle or I go into Denver, or I go into New York, like I'm trying to solve that city. There's normal, you know, things that prevent us all the time. I would say the women want the men to try harder, and the men want the women to make it easier. That's the crux. Really, and because over the last 20 years, because of this blurring of traditional gender roles, the women have gotten harder and the men have gotten softer. That is not a good dynamic, because sociologically we have changed, but physiologically we're still wired as boys and girls. So we're dealing with that sort of dynamic, that the men have kind of lost their place due to the rise of the independent woman. When we hear all the time, "I don't need you, I don't need you," well, then the guy's hitting the golf course and the PlayStation and the porn. Like, he's just like, okay, I have no place in your world. That has thrown things off over the last 20 years more than anything. Yes, technology, yes, all these other things, but really it is the shifting of traditional dating gender roles. Who pays, who picks up, who asks out, or whatever, has really shaken up the snow globe. And a lot of people 30 and up especially just don't know how to navigate that.
So what I'm hearing for you, and here we are going into the new year and dating in the new year, where's there hope?
Well, there's hope in that I believe people are asking more questions and they are trying to solve the puzzle, especially the men. I believe, and the women get mad at me for saying this, that there is a larger pool of men who are curious, vulnerable, asking questions, seeking help, trying to self-improve than has ever existed in the history of this country. And I believe a big part of that is because the women have made them feel okay doing it. the most confident man in the room is the one who sort of owns their own weakness or their vulnerability. The women are like, I know you're screwed up. As long as you know, it makes my life a lot easier. So I think there are men doing the work, which gives me hope because the women are positively responding to that. I think another thing that happened, like during COVID times, not necessarily in Florida, but in a lot of the country, people got a look at what life would be like, sort of walled off from human contact. And 20% of people love it and never came back. But a lot of people are like, oh, maybe I do need to sit across from somebody at dinner. Maybe I do like the excitement of it. Maybe the juice is worth the squeeze. And I don't want to take a chance on getting hurt and getting outside of my comfort zone and do all that. So I think that is a good thing too.
I've been single, I'm in a relationship now, but I've been single, been dating for 7+ years now. And it feels to me like there are women are tired of men who bloviate and who have a false bravado and machismo. Mm-hmm. They also don't like, for the most part, and I'm generalizing, softer guys who are pushovers.
Yeah, they don't want that either.
And the challenge for men is to walk the line in between those where we are comfortable and confident in who we are, but also willing to be vulnerable to say, I don't necessarily have it all figured out, but trust me to do so. So how do you advise men, if you advise men? First of all, if you agree, or you feel free to disagree, how do you advise men to be able to walk that? And is that what women should be looking for?
Well, I think the women get mad that I say this. They're like, I shouldn't have to train you. You're not a dog. Yes, you should. All we know is what the last girl liked, and we probably found that out too late. If you give us some sort of positive roadmap to what you need to be happy, I think we will jump as high as we want. If you said like, oh my God, are you going to wear that to dinner? We feel like we failed. If you're like, I know you're comfortable in that, but you look so hot in that blue suit, we'll put on the blue suit. We will jump to get the cheese. The problem is I ask women all the time, what do you need to be happy? And the list of what makes them unhappy is right there. The unhappy stuff dominates. The happy stuff, they haven't spent nearly as much time thinking about it. And so if they don't know, they're certainly not expressing it. And he is flying blind, sometimes bloviating, like you said, over talking. He's nervous. He's throwing a bunch of stuff out there on the first date, trying to impress you, trying to entertain you. He's doing a lot. And maybe he gets back like a thank you.
So then you can ask the question, but I think of the scene in The Breakup. Remember the movie with Jennifer, where she says, I don't want you to help me. I want you to want to help me. It's the same thing about happy. I don't want you to ask me what makes me happy. I want you to know what makes me happy. And that's hard.
It is. I mean, a lot of times the woman doesn't need to be right, but she does need to be heard. And that is tough on the guys too, because we're so obsessed with absolving ourselves of blame that it turns into this argument. And sometimes I've gotten a lot better at that. I've gotten a lot better out of saying I'm sorry, even when it wasn't something that I did. And I've learned really that because I've heard from so many women, I'm like, we just need this. Don't try and figure out our mood. Don't try and explain our mood. Try. And the older we get, you're dealing with hormones. You're dealing with baggage from past relationships. You're dealing with, so the roadmap, people get stuck in their ways as you try to date in your 40s, 50s, 60s. It is a lot more challenging than just go out to the bars and hang out and hope somebody's drunk enough to go home with you.
Since we're giving advice for dating in the new year, you nailed something that I have said before on this show, and I think you're going to agree with. So I'm off the market, as we said before, but when I was, if you had on your profile the list of things that you didn't like, to your point, you were done with. I was done with you.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want this. I don't want this. I don't want this. I don't like this. Right. No this, no that, no that. You're done. And I think any self-respecting dude out there is the same way. Like, if you're leading with all the shit you don't like, swiping, flipping left.
Keep these profiles. That's people screwed up. They overthink it. They write. You need to put. We have this rule. It's called 5-3-1. 5 things you want them to know about you. 3 things you hope to find in them, and 1 thing you hope to find together. I am this, this, and this. I'm looking for this and this, and let's run around the world.
Oh my God, that's
like
so
something
good.
Like that. Keep it simple, but keep it positive. So many people, like,
so good.
You used to be able to. Our parents might have been married for 7 years before they knew how each other voted. Now they need a referendum on Kamala Harris before the edamame comes. Like, everybody needs to lead with that, because they're like, if I know where you stand on these 4 things, I know everything about you. No, you don't.
No, you don't.
And people put that on there during the COVID. People putting their vax status on there. People put, I need this, I don't need this. And people are so, set in their ways. And all of the answers almost always lie outside of your comfort zone. And people aren't willing to go there because it's too scary. And that's where you kind of got to go.
One type of woman that I came across more than once was a personality, and I'm not a therapist or have any background in this. I think it's described as an avoidant personality. And that personality, I think, is particularly challenging because they want the security of a relationship. They want a man to lead, but they also don't want to give up their independence. And they're incredibly fearful of how those two things come together. Do you have advice for either gender? Because avoidant personalities are in both genders or multiple genders, about how to deal with that if they come across one, other than maybe run for the hills, because that might be the answer.
I mean, I say that the women look for red flags and the men look for green lights. Okay. When you are going into a date environment that way, especially the women, where you were looking for something wrong, or like you're not giving this, not just this date, this relationship, a chance to breathe. You're going to eventually have to work through sort of the ick and the uncomfortable. Everybody's looking for this perfect rom-com chemistry in the first 15 minutes, or they're out and they're on to the next. We didn't used to date that way. We can't even pick the women up for a date anymore. Like, we used to have to pick you up. It used to be, and the women are like, I knew you better then. No, you don't. I had a pen and a napkin at 2:00 in the morning, and you gave me your number, and I called you, and you're like, you're going to pick me up. And we did. And we were equally psychopaths back in the 90s, but we didn't watch Dateline and we didn't watch crazy movies. And the women are, so when you take that away, if I can't pick you up, there's no holding of the door. There's no first sign at the door. There's no chivalry. There's no, there's meet up, hang out, hope this connects quickly. There's my Uber, bye. That's not really dating. That's kind of interviewing, and we're not doing that anymore. We're not dating the way it's supposed to be. It is not fun. It is flirty. It's sort of like trying to get data. And I think when you're dating that way, it just takes a lot of the spark out of it. And a lot of people, there are so many other ways to entertain yourself in life now. Get stimuli, even see naked people. Some people are just not as motivated to find somebody. I'm not saying that you should want to be in a bad relationship over a good relationship, but people look at the possibility of a good relationship as too remote. They think it's either being a no relationship or a bad relationship because they think good relationship is statistically impossible. It's not, but people have to sort of be more hopeful about that.
Now, you had what I would say something fairly controversial in your last podcast, but I want to bring it up just because I thought it was just fascinating, and it is food for thought, and that is betting on the wrong horse. And we see this countless times, right? Women at a certain age, and you really did focus on women. We can all bet on the wrong horse, right? We can definitely do that. But you were focusing a little more on women and the biology of women, and then if you're in your early 30s and you bet on the wrong horse and you stay with that horse for 5 or 6 years, that's not a good use of your betting.
Well, the challenge is the women 34 to 45 are trying to lock down a man 34 to 45. And the man who's 34 to 45 is what is called the sweet spot, where his possibilities are 21 to 50 and everything in between. Like, he just has so many options that she's like, I'm laser focused on him. He may not be as focused. 4 years go by. She's getting out of this relationship 38, 39. And then maybe her window biologically or otherwise has certainly shrunk a lot. That is a tough challenge for a woman because you do want to give the relationship a chance to breathe, but you can't ultimatum him 1 year in because you're 35. That's not the most romantic thing either, but it's something that a lot of women have to be cognizant of. It can't just be like, oh, yeah, well, I'll go freeze my eggs and I'll deal with it later. It's not that easy.
Yeah.
Statistically or otherwise, it's not that easy. So I think you have to do sort of a referendum on where you are in a relationship, maybe every year, maybe so. Is this going? Do we have the same goals? Do we have everything? Because I was in a couple of those relationships where I felt like I wasted their 30s. They didn't hold my feet to the fire. They didn't ask anything. Kind of time went by. I think they were a little scared to go out there. I think they thought eventually Brian will snap into it. I don't know, but it didn't make any difference in my life. But I look back now, it's like, shit, they got out of that at 41 and now what?
And at this age, Brian, things are a little bit different, right? I mean, people have asked me, do I want to get married again? I don't know. It depends on the relationship and where we are in that relationship. My focus is always in relationship. Am I happy today?
Yeah.
And if I am, we continue on. Do you have other pieces of advice for both men and women who are, on the back nine and maybe in looking for second relationships?
Some people, second relationships, that's what you put it. A lot of people who've gotten divorced don't necessarily want to get married again because the fantasy of the marriage is gone. I did it. So the first time you get married, it is happily ever after.
Yeah.
It's just
And we've
like,
had our kids
we
and
had,
whatever,
and we
right.
did. But
Yeah.
so after that, a lot of people who've gotten divorced, they're like, I don't need to get married. I'm always thinking we need to come up with a title for somebody they're not my wife, but they're not my girlfriend. They're like the most special thing, a person, and this separates them from all that. I always wish that somebody was wise enough to come up with the term, like, besides, this is my guy.
Partner.
Yeah,
partner can apply
significant
other
other.
things.
They're all
Partners
weak.
Partners like you
Yeah.
formed an LLC.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know about
Right.
that either, but I've always like, what is the word for somebody like, I'm committed to this person. I want to spend as long as I can with them, but we're not necessarily going to go down the marriage route because it just doesn't make sense for either one of us. I don't know that word.
Can I just say something for somebody who did make that decision and wasn't going to? I'm just going to, because you've said this a lot on the show. Like, I don't know, it's day by day for me. And I'm just going to tell you like my sort of epiphany, right? Like I was married for 20 plus years, had a really bad relationship coming out of that, bad breakup, never getting married. I met the right person. And not just that, I met somebody that I wanted to stand in front of everybody and make those vows to. And that is it. And that is the spirituality of it in my being and how I was raised. But I had to get to that point from zero. Like, I was not getting married again. I came all the way across because I met the person.
How long did that take?
It took me 4 years, 5 years.
She created an environment where you could get confident in the concept.
100%. Let me tell you how much she did that for. I started out in that relationship, complete mistrust. I was at a place with no trust at all. So it had to build to that point. And that's kind of the point I'm making. Like, there are situations where you can go from 0 to 100 and make that decision, because I did it.
I know. Everything works. People, I used to say that I didn't want to get married unless I was really confident I was going to do 50 years with this person. And people are like, well, now you've stalled long enough. You're not going to have to do 50 years with this person. But I am as hopeful as ever personally. Like, I really do believe in the concept because I have traveled around the world and I've heard positive stories. The thing that gives me pause, especially on the early marriages, when people get divorced, I don't ask them why they got divorced. I ask them, when did you know it wasn't going to last forever? And I'm shocked at how often that answer is when he asked me.
Really?
Our wedding day before we had a kid. Like, I hear that all the time.
Wow.
And I'm like, I don't know. I think you're going on this journey. I don't know. People get married, especially the women, for a lot of other reasons. I respect that. A lot of different reasons. And I get you want to have kids and a lot of, but some people go into this like, I'll do it. If it doesn't work, I'll get divorced. It's a little flippant, you know?
When my marriage ended, I was not, and still am not opposed to marriage. It's not that I felt hurt or injured by the institution. I still believe in it as a concept. I just don't know that it means, it doesn't have the same significance for me, I don't think, as it does for Dennis. To me, the more important part of it is, as I was saying earlier, can I look at the person I'm with and saying, do I want to be with you today? Yes, I do. And believe in that, and that can last for the rest of my lives. I don't necessarily think that I need that architecture around it. It would change if my woman felt that way or my partner felt that way.
I think, like, let's try and be closer today than we were yesterday. Like, just incrementally, like, let's get closer. Let's get better. Let's communicate more. Don't stop dating your partner. That happens a lot. And I understand when you go from husband, wife to mom and dad, that is a much different dynamic and it's not nearly as fun. But you have to go back to when you were boyfriend, girlfriend. As husband, wife, you have to go back to that feeling again. That's hard to do sometimes in life.
Can I give you some advice on that, on that concept? Yeah. So if you go into it thinking it's got to get better each day, you're setting yourself up for failure, because there are going to be some days.
I'm saying that's the goal.
Right, but there are going to be days that one of you is not right. Like
totally.
one of you
Life gets in the way.
Like, right. So if you go in like, we got to get incrementally better each day, that's a business relationship,
I'm saying that's your goal. Obviously, you're going to be like, shit, this was a tough year for us, and it was hard. But if you're not just like, you're kind of got to manage achievable hurdles to get over. I don't know. Just set date night every once in a while.
I think if you can look at each other and say, today was tough, can we be better tomorrow? And the answer is not always going to be yes. But if you can't be in that together, right? That's the block.
That's emotional maturity.
There's two schools of thought on that. There's some people who say don't go to bed angry, and there's some people who say don't even talk about it until you get a good night's sleep because you're tired and emotional. I see both sides of that.
Sure.
I get it. That's why I like doing the show. There's no easy answers. When somebody comes on my show and they tell me they're a dating or relationship expert, I'm like, no, you're not. All you know is what works for you, probably. And I've had some smart people on there, Dr. Drew and John Gray, who wrote Mars, Venus or whatever. And they're like, statistically, certain things do tend to work out better than others. And a lot of this is the odds game. And a lot of this is, if you are having trouble dating in your city and you've been there for 25 years, shake up your snow globe and move. Like literally just try something else to change the landscape, change your perspective. I always tell people to get rid of the words, not my type. If you're over 30 and you're still single, you have no type. Your type's not working out for you. And because all we know is like what I think I like and it's just not working. You got to try and somebody came on my show once and they said the yes lives in the land of no. And I'm like, oh, that's smart. Like I get that. And you got to push yourself to maybe sit across from somebody who you wouldn't think was your type, or have a conversation, or go to an event, or try something else, or do something different on a date besides go to dinner every time. And a lot of people are this is what I like. This is what I know. This is what I'm comfortable with. And if they don't like it, they're not the person for me. I don't know. I think you might like something else. Yeah. I used to insist that I had to watch the Giants every Sunday. Insist. For 30 years, I never missed a Giant game. And then I had a girlfriend. She's like, listen, this is ridiculous. We live in California. There's so many more fun things we can do on a Sunday afternoon when it's sunny than you sitting in some sports bar. And I go, like what? She goes, give me one Sunday. Let me plan something. And I was like, oh my God. And we went to some like vineyard and and I didn't even think about the Giant game. And I was like, it took her the right way, not to be critical of this is so stupid, football's stupid. She's like, give me one shot to try something else. It was great.
Yeah, and it helps that it was the bye week. But
it did. It helped that they're 3-13.
Monday night.
As we move into 2025, and this is an episode that's aimed a lot at single people in middle age. So you've kind of hinted at this. Where do you think is the best place for people to meet other people?
The best dating site?
No, it could be a dating site. Well, no, or an environment
outside of your house. I'm saying like we don't go. So a lot of people they go to work. They go. If you live in a reasonably populated place, we're in Boca Raton, Florida, as we record this. Every time you leave your house during a day and you go about your day, you are within 10 yards of 1,000 people of the opposite sex. Every single day of your life, you're within 10 yards of 1,000 people. And if you're just like statistically, how many people, if you could engage with them for 30 minutes, would you possibly connect with? And people are like, I don't know, 3 or 4. And I'm like, well, 3 or 4 out of 1,000 seems like needle in a haystack. But if you looked at saying 3 or 4 every single day, that is 1,000 people a year that you are within 30 feet of, that if you just took your head out of your apps and get off your phone and tried to recognize people. And that's my book was How to Find Love in 60 Seconds. It wasn't about a quickie in a bathroom. It was about recognizing, acting on, and not dismissing opportunities that are around us every single day. Go where the people are.
Yeah.
Go to networking events. Go to socially. Like go where that's where they are. People sometimes also say, well, we have this swiping culture and everybody's swiping online. Well, we used to do laps around the bar 50 times. That was swiping. It was exactly the same thing. We just were, though, in the vicinity of live human beings. So you're taking that technological barrier down and think about it. But your best place to meet people is, like I said, I wasn't joking around, out in the world. Yep. Like get out. The UPS guy might come to your house, but the odds of him being the cute one that you want to date probably are just pretty small. Like go around the other people. If you are not comfortable because you've been married a long, long time to one guy and you're not comfortable like interacting with men, or you just go to Home Depot and just start asking questions. Like just start asking questions, get comfortable. Same with the guys. Go to Bed Bath & Beyond, grab a couple towels and say, do these match? And a lot of women will help, like get comfortable at a question and an answer as a conversation. Just start asking questions of the opposite sex. And I think that will go a long way.
Well, Dating in the New Year is the title of this show. And give me the 5-3-1 again.
5 things you want them to find out about you, 3 things you hope to find in them, and 1 thing you hope to find together.
That's the mic drop of the Dating in the New Year, Josh. So thank you very much, Brian Howie of the Great Love Debate.
Yeah.
I'm going to be a listener of your show. This has been one of the most popular topics on our show is dating. So we know why you can do it and dedicate an entire podcast to this topic, because it is a good one.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of ways to slice this apple. This show used to be pretty heavily dedicated towards single people, but we do a lot of marriages, relationship stuff, divorce stuff, finance stuff. Like everything affects everything. And, you know, pet co-ownership. We did a show on that. What happens when you get a dog together?
There's always
It's always a dicey thing.
I asked a divorce lawyer one more thing once. I go, are there too many divorces or not enough? And she said, not the right ones.
Interesting. That's a good response. I like that.
Wow.
Thank you, my friend. You've helped us start the year on the right note.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Well, there's so many great nuggets in there.
Yeah.
You know, Dennis, there are so many great takeaways. The one I have, and I've said this to you at the wedding, which is keep dating each other, right? Keep doing the things now that you're married that make you uniquely you as a couple, living out loud, dancing, rooting for the Buffalo Bills together as you guys do. Those are the important things. To his point, keep dating even as you're married. And that's easier to do in second marriages or at this stage of life than they are when you're really building your whole family and there's other responsibilities and people that are depending on you.
Yes, but I would also say that if you are in that situation where you're an empty nester, get back to that.
Oh, yeah.
Get back to dating. Yes. Yeah. So your point is great. Like it is easier for us, right? The kids are grown. We connect at every level, sense of humor, all of it, right? So, and our passions, the things we like to do together. So that's terrific. I'm very fortunate, but you can find that if you're with somebody that you had it early, you can kind of rekindle it. We've talked about that with some therapists on the show. You can find it again. So this isn't about like pivoting, getting divorced, and finding that right person. They might be right in front of you. You just have to look at things a different way in the new year.
He also talked about it in the beginning of the conversation that things have changed sociologically, but physiologically, we still respond to a lot of the same stimuli, right? And the things that motivate us in relationship. And that is a minefield, right? I think we talk the rise of independent women and stronger women and more equality than they've ever had, even if they're not all the way there, is a great advancement for society. We have not, and I think most people would admit this, even women, we have not paid similar attention to helping men adapt to that and be comfortable, kind of what we're doing here, with redefining that role in a way that allows us to be, as men, especially as heterosexual men, to be strong, masculine, confident when opportunities are a little bit different for us than they were 20 and 30 and 50 and 70 and 100 years ago. And so how do we navigate that minefield in dating? And I think that's a question that requires further scrutiny and observation.
Yeah, he said women want men to try harder and men want women to make it easier.
That's great, by the way.
I love that. I will say this, don't try too hard.
Right.
Like, you can...
And don't make it too easy.
Right, and don't make it too easy. Because if you try too hard, if you're... And I've been guilty of this. When you're trying too hard, sometimes they don't need to be fixed. You don't need to fix everything.
Oh, for sure. They don't want to be fixed.
But yeah, when the try harder things, don't try too hard. Don't over please, because that can be a problem too.
Right.
It's a fine line.
It's don't fix. Listen. Right. Most women don't want you to fix their problems. They just want you to hear their problems. They want you to join them in the emotion of it, in the feeling of it. I think that's mostly important. And I think to that end, that's absolutely the role that men should play, confident men should play in relationship.
And I will say this, I think a lot of relationships men are kind of simple. They want you to love them. They want you to be affectionate to them. And most men fit in this category. If you are giving them attention, they will try harder. They will do a lot. And he was even talking about that. You will step up your game if you're given the proper, and if you're kind to your man and you're not cross and short-tempered. You know what I mean?
I do. Here's how I would phrase that. I don't need you to prop me up, right? But I also really don't want you to break me down.
Right.
And I think that's
such a good way
I think
to say
so many, I think a lot of women get in a relationship and they get frustrated with their guy and they break him down. Or they say, I don't need to be your mom and lift you up and tell you what a good boy you are. I don't think most men need that.
No.
But we just don't want to be grieved all the time. We don't want to be nagged all the time. That's all.
Right. And I think that's important. I think that's not just important in relationships that have been going on long term. That's important in dating too. I mean, I think it's very important when you're dating to be in that mindset.
Agreed. Well, a lot of lessons to take away from Brian and
great way to start the new year.
Absolutely. There's lots of things to think about. I think most of our audience, and I speak for myself here, I'm not going to agree with everything, but there were a lot of things that I definitely take away from that, in my own relationships and in helping other people find their way.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, and Happy New Year to Janine and Olivia and Roy and Tom and our entire team. It's been a fabulous 2024.
We love our team.
And we wish all of you a fantastic 2025 of your dreams. And we know that is augmented by your listening to us. And we'll be back with you next week on The Back Nine.
Happy New Year.